accountable for any of those things. So I need more information about what exactly is happening here. I know that there's a former staffer on the Senate Intelligence Committee
who would illegally use their access to our most sensitive information to endanger our national security are, in fact, being investigated and will be prosecuted.
Now the Justice Department taking action over the leak of classified information. Authorities arresting a longtime staffer on the Senate Intelligence Committee charged with lying to the FBI. They also seized phone and email records from New York Times reporter Ali Watkins. Our Fox News media analyst Howard Kurtz is on this in Washington. Howie, good morning. Who are the journalists caught up in this leak investigation? Let's start there.
Well, we do know that James Wolfe, who's the former Senate intel aide who was arrested yesterday, had contacts with 3 reporters. The one we know about is the woman who is on the screen now, Ali Watkins of the New York Times, previously worked for Politico and BuzzFeed. And she broke a story, and this is what the investigation has to do with, having to do with Russian attempts to recruit Carter Page, the former Trump campaign volunteer. She is an obvious target because she acknowledges that she had a 3-year romantic relationship with James Wolfe. At the same time, the New York Times is reporting this morning that she contends that she never got any classified information from her ex-boyfriend and that she told each of her employers about that relationship.
Okay, so is this tied to the president's constant criticism of leakers, or is this something new on behalf of the Justice Department?
Well, very much the president has made a priority. He's spoken several times about cracking down on leaks. Now, we should recall that the Obama administration went heavy into going after reporters' records. This happened with the Associated Press. It happened with former Fox News correspondent James Rosen. There was an uproar at the time. As a result, the rules were tightened essentially to make this kind of seizure a last resort. The Attorney General's personal approval was required. But Attorney General Jeff Sessions has also made it a priority. In fact, he said the Trump administration is conducting 3 times as many leak investigations as were going on at the end of Barack Obama's term.
Okay, one more. What is the impact on the news business, Howie?
You can't overstate it, Bill. It's a real classic chilling effect. In fact, the Times has a statement today saying this will endanger reporters' ability to promise confidentiality to their sources. Some of these communications took place through encrypted text messaging. And it is, you know, there's a real tension here. It is illegal. It is a crime to leak confidential information, classified information, I should say. At the same time, journalists rely on these leaks to get what they think is important information. But this sends a very strong signal that you've got to be careful and that reporter sources may dry up. And it seems to me that this won't be the last case we'll have.
And this whole encryption matter, too, is something you can report on for years to come because it's becoming more and more critical in all these investigations, whether the one we're talking about now or whether it's tied to Mueller or on and on. Howie, thank you so much. Howard Kurtz in Washington.
Running an already full news cycle today was word that James Wolfe, seen here leaving court just moments ago, who served as the Senate Intel Committee's security director for 29 years, has been indicted for lying to the FBI about leaks to the press. Joining me now to discuss this and other security developments is Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert, member of the House Judiciary Committee. When it rains, it pours, Congressman. There's just so much to talk about. But this guy in particular, he wasn't just a low-level staffer. He was head of security for the Senate Intel Committee. And if he is leaking, I guess it's fair to say that people, you know, the minions under him could be leaking as well.
Well, that's quite true. It could have been because he certainly wouldn't report them since he was doing it himself. And I guess 28, 29 years in that position, you know, familiarity breeds contempt. And
let's talk about specifically what he was leaking, because that's the first question people have been asking me, what this guy was leaking. It was stuff about, at least the only stuff that we know about, was stuff about Carter Page, the guy who a lot of people, anti-Trump folks, were trying to link to Russia. Carter Page was the link to Russia and the Trump campaign. That's what they claim, and that's what he was leaking. Do we know more than that about what it was he was leaking about Carter Page?
Not any more specifics yet, but it tells you the state is deep, and there are a lot of people around the Hill that did not want Donald Trump to win. He is not part of the deep state. He had made clear he wanted to clean out the swamp, drain the swamp. And so what you have is one of the swamp creatures. But, David, I don't think we need to lose sight of the fact, again, this is a headline, but it has absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump, the Trump campaign, Russia, or anything of that nature. This is a guy that needed to be cleaned out, but that is not something we needed Robert Mueller for. Right. We need somebody to clean out Robert Mueller. We didn't need Mueller to do this. This needed to be done, but this was not the purpose of having a special counsel.
Right.
It should be the purpose of having a special counsel to clean out Mueller's closet, but again, this has nothing to do. This is just another little thing behind the curtain to make it look like Mueller is doing something, but this is nothing he was hired or brought on to do.
There is something about this case, the finding that this guy was apparently leaking to the press and lied to the FBI about it. The reporter to whom he was leaking the information, she now works for the New York Times. She was working for BuzzFeed at the time of this particular leak. Some people say it was too much to go into her records, to go into her phone records and her email records in order to focus on this guy. What do you think about that?
I think that apparently he had been around long enough that he knew the Mueller and Comey techniques. He used the same techniques, for example, that Comey did. He had somebody in the media, somebody friendly he could leak stuff to. He had learned from the best. He learned from Comey, he learned from Mueller, like when Mueller leaked stuff about Kurt Weldon or somebody on his behalf. So this is another creature of the swamp, just like Mueller and Comey are, and Weissman and Rosenstein. So, I mean, for heaven's sake, though, David, don't lose sight of it. They are coming after him tooth and nail for doing the same thing that Comey and Mueller have done throughout their career.
Congressman, very quickly, we got word that the actual IG report, the Inspector General's report, which has been looking into the Hillary thing, is going to be coming out on the president's birthday probably next week. Do you think that we're going to find out anything interesting there?
Sure, there are going to be a number of interesting things, but not nearly as important or as interesting as it would have been if it had come out 6 months ago, before the people inside the Justice Department had a chance to put pressure on Horowitz to clean this thing up, try not to hurt too many people too deeply. So I'm trying to prepare people. This isn't going to be the blockbuster deal. That takes a second counsel to go into this stuff, because Mueller, Comey, they're not going to let this guy come out and hurt them too badly.
Right. Well, the second counsel discussion is a long one. We're going to have to save that for later. Congressman Louis Gohmert, have a great weekend.
For a year.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you again.
Here now, Andrew McCarthy, former federal prosecutor and National Review contributing editor, and Judith Miller, former New York Times reporter. She spent 85 days in jail protecting her rights as a member of the press. She is also a Fox News contributor. Judith, let me start with you on this. What's your take? Because every reporter tries to find sources who will give them information about what's going on. At this point, it doesn't appear that that was classified information. So what do you think?
Well, Martha, my friends and former colleagues at the New York Times say that this was just an outrageous invasion of Ali Watkins' privacy, that they seized her metadata it basically erodes the understanding that was reached between the press and Eric Holder when he was Attorney General. The Justice Department says that is not so, that they scrupulously followed those guidelines. They did not invade her privacy or go after her metadata just for the heck of it, and that there were national security grounds for doing so. It's hard to know what the truth is in this case, because we don't know what kind of national security information was compromised. I obviously, as a member of the press, feel strongly that since Attorney General Sessions has threatened us and threatened to put more reporters in jail to stop leaks, one has to be suspicious. And we know that in my case, for example, no national security information was compromised. the FBI and the Justice Department were trying to make a political case, but we don't know enough yet, at least I don't, to draw a conclusion in this case.
Yeah, Judith talks about the metadata material, which essentially meant that they were able to track if her phone number was discussing anything with his phone number, but not the actual content of what was going back and forth. So they know that they were contacting each other. Andrew, what do you think?
Well, you know, Martha, as Catherine said, these are interests that have to be balanced. The government has a very important interest here. The leaking of classified information has been outrageous, going back to before the time that Trump was sworn into office. And at the same time, we have to have a free, robust press. And I think Judy's case, for example, is a cautionary tale of what happens when you have a case that isn't meritorious enough to use this kind of extreme measure that the government has. On the other hand, having had over the years to apply these guidelines, you do have to make a balancing. And the fact of the matter is, in the jurisprudence of the First Amendment, the journalist is not given a privilege, at least much of one, above and beyond what the normal person has in terms of privacy. So I think you have to balance, is there a very serious case? Is the journalist somehow implicated in it, either as somebody who witnessed it, who's somebody who's participated in it? And is it a situation where only the journalist has information that the prosecutor needs in order to make this serious case? If you can't check all those boxes, we shouldn't even be talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this obviously goes back to trying to figure out how the information came out that led to the investigation and the Russia investigation. And that was one of the things that the president wants to learn more about. Carter Page was one of the stories that she wrote about. And I know, Andrew, you believe that there's, sort of an anti-Trump bias in what you see coming from Mr. Wolfe, who we should point out, Judy, has been working on the Senate Intel Committee for decades, and he had a lot of access to classified information as he brought in witnesses. I mean, he had a very high-level clearance in all of this.
Absolutely, but Martha, he's not being charged with leaking classified information.
No.
He's being charged with lying to the FBI. So it's very hard to know what the national security interests here that are supposedly being jeopardized are. I think as a journalist, and we all have to be suspicious of the government's motives. On the other hand, it's also interesting to me that, as the government pointed out, she was the only reporter whose records were seized. The other three reporters, that wasn't the case.
And it may be, Andrew, as they dig into this, that perhaps there was an issue of classified information. We just don't know that yet. I mean, they basically were able to nail him down in terms of the interactions that he had with this reporter. He claims that he never released any classified information.
Well, I think also, Martha, it's possible that the case has been charged in a strategic way. By charging it as a 3-count false statements case, there's at least a chance that the prosecutors won't have to make discovery in the case of what the classified information is. Now, the skeptical among us will say that's because they're trying to keep under wraps that this isn't such a serious case. Hopefully, we'd be able to say it's because there's really serious classified information, and if you can dispose of the case without exposing it, you should try to do that.
Just 20 seconds left. But, Andrew, you talk about the president's rights to privacy and information as well, as measured against the press.
Yeah, well, I think, it's interesting that the press is up in arms over this, and perhaps rightly so. But the president is fighting this request to be interrogated, and I think there's an obligation on the special counsel's part to show he's got a serious case, too.
All right, we got to leave it there. Thank you very much. Great to see both of you tonight.
Thank you. God bless you. And God bless America.